The morning sun cast long shadows across the McKenna ranch as Tom worked the fence line, his weathered hands gripping the wire cutters with practiced ease. 3 years of solitude had carved deep lines around his grey eyes, and his once broad shoulders now carried the weight of isolation like a yoke. The cattle moved lazily in the distance, their lowing the only sound breaking the desert silence. He paused, wiping sweat from his brow with a faded bandana, when movement caught his eye near the old oak by the creek. At first he thought it might be a deer, but the figure was too upright, too deliberate. Tom squinted against the harsh New Mexico sun, his hand instinctively moving to the Colt 45 at his hip. A young Apache girl emerged from behind the tree, her dark hair braided with strips of leather, her buckskin dress torn and stained with what looked like dried blood. She couldn't have been more than 16, but her eyes held the weight of someone who had seen too much. She moved with the fluid grace of her people, yet there was something broken in her posture, a wariness that spoke of recent trauma. "Easy there, girl," Tom called out, his voice rusty from disuse. "You lost?" She froze, her dark eyes fixed on him with the intensity of a cornered animal. For a long moment, neither moved. Then she spoke, her English surprisingly clear despite a slight accent. "Water," she said simply, gesturing toward the creek. "Please." Tom studied her face, noting the exhaustion etched in her features, the way her hands trembled slightly. Whatever had brought her here, it wasn't good. The territorial tensions had been escalating for months, and Apache bands were being hunted down with increasing frequency. "There's a well by the house," he said, holstering his gun. "Cleaner than the creek water." She hesitated, clearly torn between need and caution. Tom could see the internal struggle playing out across her face. Trust or run. Finally, thirst won out, and she nodded. As they walked toward the modest adobe house, Tom noticed the way she favored her left leg and the defensive way she held her shoulders. "You hurt?" he asked. "I will survive," she replied, though her voice carried a note of uncertainty. At the well, Tom worked the pump handle while she cupped her hands, drinking deeply. The water ran down her chin and neck, and she closed her eyes in relief. When she finished, she straightened and looked directly at him. "I am Aiyana," she said. "My people, they are gone." The simple statement carried enormous weight. Tom had heard the reports. Another cavalry raid, another Apache band, pacified. He'd tried to stay out of the politics, but standing here with this girl, the human cost became impossible to ignore. "I'm Tom McKenna," he said. "This is my ranch." "I know," she replied, surprising him. "You are the man who does not harm Apache who pass through your land." He hadn't realized his reputation had spread among the local tribes. After his wife Sarah and daughter Emma had died of fever, he'd lost interest in the conflict swirling around him. Live and let live had become his philosophy, born more from apathy than compassion. "Your family?" he asked gently. Aiyana's jaw tightened. "Bluecoats came at dawn. My father fought to give us time to escape. I ran, but—" She gestured to her torn dress, the bloodstains. "I am alone now." Tom felt something stir in his chest, an emotion he'd thought dead and buried with his own family. "You can't stay here," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. "I know," she replied, "but I have nowhere else to go. The other bands, they fled south. I cannot catch them on foot." Before Tom could respond, the sound of approaching horses echoed across the valley. Dust clouds rose from the main trail, and he could make out at least 4 riders heading toward the ranch. Aiyana tensed, her hand moving to a knife at her belt. "Inside," Tom said quickly. "Now." They hurried into the house, where Tom positioned himself by the window. The riders were close enough now that he could see Sheriff Garrett's badge glinting in the sunlight. Behind him rode 3 deputies, their faces grim with purpose. "Stay back from the windows," Tom whispered to Aiyana. "Let me handle this." She nodded, but kept her hand on her knife. The sound of hoofbeats grew louder, then stopped outside. Tom heard the familiar creak of leather as the men dismounted. "McKenna!" Sheriff Garrett's voice boomed across the yard. "We need to talk." Tom opened the door and stepped onto the porch, closing it firmly behind him. "Morning, Sheriff. What brings you all the way out here?" Garrett was a tall man with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. He'd been fair in his dealings with Tom over the years, but he was also a man who followed orders without question. "We're tracking an Apache girl," Garrett said, his gaze sweeping the ranch buildings. "Survivor from yesterday's action up north. She's dangerous, Tom. We need to find her before she causes trouble." "Dangerous?" Tom raised an eyebrow. "She's just a girl." "She's Apache," Deputy Reynolds interjected, his hand resting on his gun. "They're all dangerous." Tom felt his jaw clench. What exactly are you planning to do with her? Take her to Father Santos at the mission, Garrett replied. Get her civilized, educated. It's for her own good. Through the window, Tom caught a glimpse of Aiyana's face. The fear in her eyes was unmistakable. Not fear of death, but of something worse. He'd heard stories about the mission schools, how they stripped away everything that made a person who they were. Haven't seen any Apache girl, Tom said carefully. Just been working the fence line all morning. Garrett studied him for a long moment. Mind if we look around, just to be sure? Tom's hand moved closer to his gun. I do mind, actually. This is private property. The tension in the yard was palpable. The deputies shifted in their saddles, hands moving to their weapons. Tom stood his ground, knowing that whatever happened next would change everything. Tom, Garrett said quietly, don't make this harder than it needs to be. The silence stretched between Tom and Sheriff Garrett like a taut wire ready to snap. Tom could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. One decision that would determine not just his fate, but Aiyana's as well. Behind him, he sensed her presence at the window, waiting to see what kind of man he truly was. Sheriff, Tom said slowly, I've been neighborly with you for years. Never caused trouble, paid my taxes, kept to myself. I'm asking you to respect my property rights. Garrett's eyes narrowed. Tom, I've got orders from the territorial governor himself. We can't have Apache raiders running loose, especially not after what happened to the Martinez family last month. What happened to the Martinez family was done by Geronimo's band, Tom replied. This girl, if there even is a girl, she's not part of that. Deputy Reynolds spat into the dust. Apache's Apache. They're all cut from the same cloth. Tom felt his temper flare. That's enough, Reynolds. You're on my land and I won't have that kind of talk here. Easy, both of you, Garrett said, raising his hand. He studied Tom's face carefully. You know something, don't you? She's here. Tom met his gaze steadily. I told you what I know. From inside the house came the faint sound of movement, and Tom saw Garrett's hand move to his gun. The other deputies followed suit, creating a circle of potential violence around the small adobe house. Tom, Garrett said quietly, I'm going to ask you one more time. Step aside and let us search the house. If she's not here, we'll be on our way. And if she is, then we take her to Father Santos. She'll be fed, clothed, educated. It's more mercy than most would show. Tom thought of the stories he'd heard about the mission schools, children forbidden to speak their own language, forced to abandon their names, their beliefs, their very identity. He remembered his own daughter, Emma, how she'd laughed when he taught her to ride, how her eyes had sparkled with curiosity about the world around her. What would he have done if someone had tried to take that away from her? No, Tom said simply. The word hung in the air like a gunshot. Garrett's face hardened. Tom, don't make me arrest you for harboring a fugitive. Fugitive? Tom's voice rose. What crime has she committed? Being born Apache? Surviving when her family was killed? The territorial government has declared all Apache not on reservations to be enemy combatants, Garrett replied. You know that. I know a lot of things, Sheriff. I know that girl in there. Yes, she's in there. Watched her family die yesterday. I know she's hurt, scared, and alone, and I know that turning her over to you would be wrong. Deputy Martinez, who had remained silent until now, shifted uncomfortably in his saddle. Sheriff, maybe we should... Should what? Reynolds snapped. Let an Apache killer go free? She's not a killer, Tom said firmly. She's a child. Tom, Garrett said, his voice taking on a pleading tone, you're forcing my hand here. I don't want to hurt you, but I have my orders. Tom looked at each of the men in turn, calculating odds, distances, cover. 3 deputies, all armed, all younger than him. Not good odds, but he'd faced worse during the war. Still, this wasn't about him anymore. Give me a minute, Tom said. Let me talk to her. Garrett hesitated, then nodded. 1 minute. Tom turned and went back into the house, where Aiyana stood pressed against the far wall, her knife in her hand. Her dark eyes were fierce with desperate courage, but he could see the fear underneath. They want to take me to the mission, she said quietly. I know. Tom moved to a wooden chest in the corner and opened it. Inside, wrapped in oiled cloth, was Sarah's rifle, a Henry repeater that had belonged to her father. He'd taught her to shoot with it, and she'd become deadly accurate. Can you use one of these? Aiyana's eyes widened. You would give me a weapon? I'm giving you a choice, Tom said, lifting the rifle and a box of ammunition. You can go with them, try to make the best of it at the mission, or you can fight. But if you fight, there's no going back. You'll be a fugitive for the rest of your life. She stared at the rifle, then at his face. Why would you do this? You do not know me. Tom thought of Emma, of the life she'd never get to live. "Because it's right," he said simply. "Because everyone deserves the chance to choose their own path." Aiyana reached out and took the rifle, her hands sure and steady as she checked the action. "My father taught me to shoot with the white man's guns," she said. "He said we must know our enemy's weapons." "I'm not your enemy," Tom said. "No," she agreed, meeting his eyes. "You are not." Outside, Garrett's voice grew impatient. "Time's up, Tom." Tom moved to the window and called out, "She's not coming with you, Sheriff." "Then we're coming in," Garrett replied. "No, you're not." The front door opened and Tom stepped out onto the porch. Behind him, Aiyana appeared in the doorway, the Henry rifle held with competent familiarity. The sight of her, armed and defiant, sent a ripple of tension through the deputies. "Jesus Christ, Tom," Garrett breathed. "What have you done?" "What I had to do," Tom replied. "You boys can turn around and ride back to town. Tell the territorial governor that his Apache problem just got more complicated." Reynolds started to draw his gun, but Garrett's sharp command stopped him. "Hold it!" The sheriff's eyes never left Tom's face. "You know this means war, don't you? They'll send the cavalry, they'll burn you out." "Maybe," Tom said, "but not today. Today you're outnumbered." Aiyana stepped forward, the rifle trained on Garrett. "I will not go to your mission," she said clearly. "I will not be made white. I will die first." "Nobody's dying today," Tom said firmly. "Sheriff, you and your boys are going to mount up and ride out. You're going to tell everyone that you searched the ranch and found nothing. The girl got away, headed south toward Mexico." "Tom? That's how it's going to be, Sheriff. Unless you want to explain to the territorial governor how you lost 3 good men trying to capture one Apache girl." Garrett looked at the rifle in Aiyana's hands, at the determination in Tom's face, and made his calculation. Slowly he nodded to his deputies. "Mount up," he said quietly. As they prepared to leave, Garrett looked back at Tom. "This isn't over. You know that, right?" "I know," Tom replied. "But it's not over on my terms now." The sheriff and his men rode away, leaving a cloud of dust and the promise of future trouble. Tom watched until they disappeared over the ridge, then turned to Aiyana. "Well," he said, "looks like we're both outlaws now." For the first time since he'd met her, Aiyana almost smiled. "Yes," she said, "we are." The dust from the sheriff's departure had barely settled when Tom began pacing the front porch, his mind racing through the implications of what he'd just done. Aiyana stood in the doorway, still holding Sarah's rifle, watching him with those dark, intelligent eyes that seemed to see more than she let on. "We need to talk," Tom said, stopping his pacing. "About what comes next." Aiyana nodded and followed him back into the house. The interior was sparse but clean, a man's home devoid of the feminine touches that had once made it warm. She noticed the dust-covered photographs on the mantel, the unused rocking chair by the window, the sense of life suspended in grief. "Your family," she said quietly, gesturing toward the photographs. Tom's jaw tightened. "My wife, Sarah, and daughter, Emma. Fever took them 3 years ago." He paused, studying her face. "That rifle belonged to Sarah. Her father gave it to her when she was about your age." "It is a fine weapon," Aiyana said, running her hand along the stock. "She must have been a good shot." "The best I ever saw," Tom replied, a ghost of a smile crossing his face. "She could put 5 shots in a circle the size of a silver dollar at 100 yards. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, 2 people bound by loss and circumstance. Then Tom's practical nature reasserted itself. "Garrett will be back," he said. "Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but he'll be back. And next time, he'll bring more men." "Then I should go," Aiyana said. "You have done enough. I will not bring more trouble to your house." "Where would you go?" Tom asked. "You said the other bands fled south. That's hundreds of miles of desert, and half the cavalry in the territory is looking for Apache to kill or capture." Aiyana lifted her chin proudly. "I am Apache. The desert is my home." "The desert doesn't care if you're Apache or white," Tom said bluntly. "It'll kill you just the same if you're not prepared." He moved to the window, scanning the horizon. "Besides, I made my choice when I handed you that rifle. No backing out now." "Why?" The question came out sharper than she intended. "Why did you choose me over your own people?" Tom was quiet for a long moment, still looking out at the harsh landscape. "Because they stopped being my people the day they decided a scared girl was more dangerous than the men who killed her family." That evening, as the sun painted the desert in shades of gold and crimson, Tom showed Aiyana around the ranch. She moved with the fluid grace of someone raised in the wilderness, noticing things he'd stopped seeing, the way the cattle bunched up when a storm was coming, the tracks that told of coyotes prowling near the chicken coop, the subtle signs that spoke of the land's health. "You know this place well," she observed as they walked along the creek. "Been here 8 years, Tom replied. "Bought it when I mustered out of the army. Thought it would be a good place to raise a family." His voice carried the weight of dreams unfulfilled. "It is a good place," Aiyana said, kneeling by the water's edge. "The earth is strong here. The ancestors would approve." Tom looked at her curiously. "Ancestors? My people believe the dead watch over the living," she explained. "They guide us, protect us. Your wife and daughter, they are still here in this place they loved." Tom felt something twist in his chest. Not pain exactly, but a recognition of truth he'd been avoiding. "Sometimes I feel like I'm just keeping their graves company." "Perhaps," Aiyana said, standing and brushing dust from her buckskin dress. "Or perhaps you were meant to be here for this moment, to help someone who needed it." They made an odd pair as they worked together over the next few days, the weathered rancher and the Apache girl, learning to trust each other through shared labor and quiet conversation. Tom taught her the routines of ranch life, how to milk the cow, gather eggs, tend the vegetable garden that Sarah had started and he'd neglected. In return, Aiyana shared knowledge that could mean the difference between life and death in the harsh desert. She showed him which plants could be eaten, which could heal wounds, how to read the signs that warned of Apache war parties or cavalry patrols. Her presence brought a vitality to the ranch that had been missing since his family's death. "You move like a soldier," Aiyana observed one morning as they repaired a section of fence. "Where did you learn to fight?" "War between the states," Tom replied, driving a fence post into the hard ground. "Fought with the Union Army. Spent 4 years learning how to kill other Americans." "And now you protect an Apache," she said with what might have been amusement. "Your enemies would not understand." "My enemies are dead," Tom said simply. "Most of them anyway. The war's been over for 16 years, but some folks are still fighting it." Aiyana nodded. "It is the same with my people. Some say we must fight until every white man is driven from our land. Others say we must learn to live in the white man's world or die. I think there might be another way." "What way is that?" "To find people like you," she said, meeting his eyes. "People who judge by what is in here," she touched her chest, "not by the color of skin or the shape of eyes." That afternoon, while Tom worked with the horses, Aiyana practiced with the rifle. The sharp crack of gunfire echoed across the valley as she put bullet after bullet into a target Tom had set up. Her accuracy was remarkable, and Tom found himself thinking that Sarah would have approved. "Your father taught you well," he said as she reloaded. "He said a weapon is only as good as the person who wields it," Aiyana replied. "Courage, skill, and wisdom, these make a warrior, not just a gun." "Smart man, he was." Her voice grew sad. "He wanted peace, but he would not let his people be caged like animals. The Bluecoats said he was a renegade, but he was just a father trying to protect his children." Tom understood that feeling all too well, the need to protect, to stand between those you loved and the dangers of the world. It was a feeling he'd thought died with Emma, but here it was again, fierce and undeniable. As the days passed, they developed a rhythm, a partnership born of necessity, but strengthened by mutual respect. Tom found himself looking forward to their conversations, to the way Aiyana's presence made the empty house feel less like a tomb and more like a home. But the peace couldn't last forever. On the 4th day, as Tom was checking the cattle in the far pasture, he saw smoke rising from the direction of town. Too much smoke for cooking fires, too organized for an accident. "Aiyana," he called, spurring his horse toward the house. "We've got company coming." She emerged from the barn, rifle in hand, her face grave. "How many?" "Don't know yet, but it's more than 4 this time." Tom dismounted and grabbed his own rifle from the saddle boot. "They're burning something in town, probably working up their courage." Aiyana's eyes were hard as flint. "Let them come. I will not run again." "Neither will I," Tom said. "This is our stand." They prepared for war. 2 unlikely allies united by conscience and circumstance, ready to face whatever came over the horizon. In the distance, the smoke continued to rise, a dark promise of the storm that was coming their way. The riders came at dawn, silhouetted against the pale morning sky like harbingers of judgment. Tom counted at least 12 men, more than he'd expected, but not more than he'd feared. Through his field glasses he could make out Sheriff Garrett in the lead, but the others were strangers, territorial militia by the look of their uniforms and the way they rode in formation. "Territorial Guard," Tom muttered, handing the glasses to Aiyana. Garrett called in the professionals. Aiyana studied the approaching force with the calm assessment of someone raised in warfare. The one with the red beard. He is their war chief? Captain Morrison, Tom confirmed. Fought against the Confederates, then stayed on to fight Apache. He's got a reputation for being thorough. And brutal? That too. They had spent the night preparing, turning the ranch house into a fortress. Tom had moved ammunition and supplies to strategic locations, while Aiyana had used her knowledge of Apache tactics to create hidden positions and escape routes. The house commanded a good view of the approaches, and they had clear fields of fire in all directions. They will try to talk first, Aiyana said, checking her rifle one final time. White men always believe their words can accomplish what their guns cannot. Maybe, Tom replied, but Morrison's not the talking type. He's here to finish what Garrett started. The riders halted about 50 yards from the house, just outside easy rifle range. Captain Morrison dismounted and walked forward, his hand resting casually on his saber hilt. He was a big man with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen too much killing. McKenna, he called out. I'm Captain Morrison, New Mexico Territorial Guard. I'm here on official business. Tom stepped onto the porch, rifle held loosely, but ready. Morning, Captain. Little early for social calls, isn't it? Cut the jokes, McKenna. You're harboring a hostile Apache. Hand her over, and we'll consider this matter closed. Hostile? Tom's voice carried across the yard. She's 16 years old, Captain. What makes her hostile? Her race makes her hostile, Morrison replied coldly. Apache kill white settlers. It's what they do. This Apache hasn't killed anyone. Yet, Morrison's voice hardened. But give her time, and she will. It's in their nature. Tom felt his anger rise. You know what's in my nature, Captain. I don't like being threatened on my own land. Morrison smiled, but there was no warmth in it. This isn't a threat, McKenna. This is a lawful order. Surrender the Apache or we'll take her by force. And if I refuse, then you'll be charged with treason against the territorial government. Harboring enemy combatants is a hanging offense. Tom was quiet for a moment, then shook his head. Can't do it, Captain. The girl stays with me. So be it. Morrison turned and walked back to his men, issuing orders in a low voice. Tom watched as they spread out in a rough semicircle, preparing for assault. They mean to kill us both, Aiyana said quietly from the doorway. Probably, Tom agreed. You sure you want to do this? Aiyana's answer came in the form of a rifle shot that knocked one of the militiamen from his horse. The man hit the ground hard and didn't get up. Well, Tom said, diving for cover as return fire erupted, that answers that question. The battle was fierce, but brief. Morrison's men were soldiers, but they were trained to fight in formation, not to assault a fortified position defended by two people who had nothing left to lose. Tom's military experience and Aiyana's Apache training proved a deadly combination. They used the terrain to their advantage, moving from position to position, never staying in one place long enough for the soldiers to get a clear shot. Aiyana's knowledge of Apache warfare tactics kept them one step ahead of Morrison's predictable military approach. There, Tom called out, pointing to a group of soldiers trying to flank them through the barn. 3 of them, coming around the left side. Aiyana was already moving, her rifle speaking with deadly accuracy. 2 of the soldiers went down while the third retreated in panic. The fight might have continued all day, but Father Santos chose that moment to arrive. The priest rode up the main trail with his hands raised, calling out for a ceasefire. "Stop this madness," he shouted. "There's been enough killing." Morrison's men held their fire, and Tom motioned for Aiyana to do the same. Father Santos dismounted and walked into the space between the two forces, his black robes making him look like a harbinger of peace in a landscape of war. "Captain Morrison," the priest said, "I may have a solution that serves everyone's interests. Unless you can resurrect my dead men, Father, I'm not interested in solutions," Morrison replied coldly. "The girl," Father Santos continued, "let me take her to the mission. She'll be safe there, properly cared for and educated. No one else needs to die." Tom looked at Aiyana, seeing the conflict in her eyes. The mission represented everything she'd been fighting against, but it also represented a chance to live. "What do you say, girl?" Tom called out. "It's your choice." Aiyana stood up slowly, her rifle still in her hands. "I have heard what happens at your mission, priest. Children go in Apache and come out broken. They forget their names, their families, their spirits. We save their souls," Father Santos replied. "We give them a chance at civilization." "Whose civilization?" Aiyana's voice carried clearly across the battlefield. "The civilization that killed my family? The civilization that would cage me like an animal to break my spirit? Child, You don't understand. I understand perfectly, Aiyana interrupted. You would make me white on the inside to match the white world on the outside. But I am Apache. I will always be Apache. And I choose to die Apache rather than live as something I am not. Morrison stepped forward, his patience exhausted. Enough talk. We came here to do a job and we're going to finish it. No, said a new voice. Sheriff Garrett emerged from behind his horse, his face grim. We came here to arrest a hostile Apache, but what I see is a scared girl who's been protecting herself and a man who's been protecting her. There's no crime in that. Sheriff, Morrison said dangerously, you're out of line. Maybe, Garrett replied, but I've been thinking about this for days, about what it means to be a lawman, about the difference between law and justice. He looked at Tom and Aiyana. I think maybe we've been on the wrong side of this fight. Morrison's hand moved to his gun. Stand down, Sheriff. That's an order. You're not my commanding officer, Captain, Garrett replied calmly. And this isn't the army. This is supposed to be America, where people have rights. Apache don't have rights, Morrison snarled. People do, Garrett said simply. And she's people. The standoff stretched taut, balanced on the edge of violence. Tom could see Morrison calculating odds, weighing the cost of continuing the fight against the political implications of killing a sheriff who'd had a change of heart. Finally, Morrison holstered his weapon. This isn't over, he said. The territorial government won't stand for this. Then the territorial government will have to deal with me, Garrett replied. And anyone else who believes in doing what's right instead of what's easy. As Morrison and his remaining men rode away, Tom felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Not just for survival, but for the possibility that maybe, just maybe, there was still some justice left in the world. Sheriff, he called out, you sure about this? You know what it's going to cost you? Garrett smiled, and for the first time since Tom had known him, the smile reached his eyes. Some things are worth the cost, Tom. Some things are worth standing up for. Aiyana lowered her rifle, her dark eyes bright with unshed tears. You would risk everything for someone you do not know? I know enough, Garrett replied. I know you're brave and you're fighting for something worth fighting for. That's all I need to know. As the sun climbed higher in the New Mexico sky, three unlikely allies stood together in the aftermath of battle, bound by the knowledge that they had chosen principle over politics, courage over convenience. The fight was far from over, but they had won something more important than a single battle. They had won the right to choose their own destiny. 3 months had passed since the battle at the McKenna Ranch, and the territorial government's response had been swift and predictable. Captain Morrison filed his report, painting Tom as a traitor and Aiyana as a dangerous renegade. Sheriff Garrett was suspended pending investigation. But something unexpected had happened in the aftermath. Public opinion began to shift. The story spread through the territory like wildfire, carried by travelers, merchants, and newspaper correspondents who'd heard about the standoff. The image of a lonely rancher protecting a 16-year-old Apache girl captured imaginations and consciences across New Mexico. Letters to the territorial capital poured in, some demanding justice, others calling for mercy. Tom stood on his porch in the early morning light, watching Aiyana work with the horses in the corral. She'd grown stronger in the months since the fight, both physically and emotionally. The haunted look had faded from her eyes, replaced by something he could only call hope. Morning, Sheriff Garrett called out as he rode up the trail. He'd been coming by regularly, partly to check on them, and partly because he'd found himself without many friends in town since taking their side. Morning, Bill, Tom replied, using the sheriff's first name for the first time in all the years they'd known each other. Coffee's on. They sat on the porch drinking coffee and watching Aiyana gentle a young mare that had been skittish when Tom first bought her. The girl had a way with animals that bordered on magical, not supernatural, but born of patience, understanding, and an intuitive connection to living things. Any word from the capital? Tom asked. Garrett nodded grimly. Governor's under pressure from both sides. Morrison wants you arrested for treason. But Senator Carlisle's been asking questions about the whole Apache policy. Seems he's got some influence back in Washington. Think it'll make a difference? Maybe. Times are changing, Tom. People are starting to realize that killing and capturing every Apache isn't going to solve anything. There's talk of real treaties, real reservations where they can keep their customs and govern themselves. Tom glanced at Aiyana, who was now brushing the mare with gentle strokes. What does she think about reservations? Why don't you ask her? Garrett suggested. That afternoon, as they worked together mending harness in the shade of the barn, Tom brought up the subject. Aiyana listened thoughtfully as he explained what Garrett had told him about the changing political climate. "A reservation where Apache can live as Apache?" she asked. "Not like the mission, where they try to make us white?" "That's the idea," Tom replied. "Self-government, traditional customs respected. It's not perfect, but it might be better than what's happening now." Aiyana was quiet for a long moment, her hands working automatically with the leather. "My father always said the white man's promises were like morning frost, beautiful to look at but gone when the sun rises." "Some promises are kept," Tom said gently. "Not all white men are the same, just like not all Apache are the same." "I know this," she replied. "How you have taught me this, you and the sheriff, but reservations?" She shook her head. "They are still cages, even if they are larger cages." "What would you do, if you had the choice?" Aiyana looked around the ranch, at the adobe house, the corrals, the fields green with late summer growth. "I would stay here," she said simply. "This feels like home now." Tom felt his throat tighten with emotion. "You know you're welcome here as long as you want to stay, but there might not be a choice." "The territorial government is made up of men," Aiyana interrupted, "and men can change their minds. You changed yours. The sheriff changed his. Perhaps others will too." The sound of approaching horses interrupted their conversation. Tom reached for his rifle, but Aiyana put a hand on his arm. "Wait," she said. "Listen." Tom strained his ears and heard what she'd detected, voices calling out in greeting, not challenge. A moment later, Father Santos appeared around the bend in the trail, but he wasn't alone. Riding beside him was a man Tom didn't recognize, elderly and dignified, wearing the clothes of an Eastern gentleman. "Tom, Aiyana," Father Santos called out as they approached. "I'd like you to meet someone. This is Senator Carlisle from Washington." The senator dismounted with the careful movements of a man more accustomed to legislative chambers than ranch yards. He was perhaps 70, with silver hair and eyes that missed nothing. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone used to being heard. "Mr. McKenna, Miss Aiyana," he said, nodding to each in turn. "I've come a long way to meet you both." "Senator," Tom replied cautiously, "what brings you to New Mexico?" "You do," Carlisle said simply. "Both of you. Your story has reached Washington, and it's caused quite a stir. Some are calling you a traitor, others a hero. I wanted to see for myself what kind of people could inspire such passionate opinions." Aiyana studied the senator with the same careful attention she gave to wild animals, looking for signs of danger or deception. "What do you want from us?" she asked directly. Carlisle smiled, and it seemed genuine. "Honesty. The truth about what happened here, why it happened, and what you think should happen next." They spent the afternoon talking, the senator asking thoughtful questions and listening carefully to the answers. He wanted to know about Aiyana's family, her traditions, her hopes for the future. He asked Tom about his decision to protect her, about the cost of that choice, about his vision for how different peoples might live together. "The current Apache policy isn't working," Carlisle said as the sun began to set. "Everyone can see that. But changing it will require proof that there's a better way. You two have provided that proof." "How?" Aiyana asked. "By showing that people from different cultures can respect each other, protect each other, and live together without either side losing what makes them who they are." The senator looked at both of them. "You've created something here that most people thought was impossible." Father Santos leaned forward. "Senator Carlisle has a proposal, a new kind of arrangement." "What kind of arrangement?" Tom asked suspiciously. "A pilot program," Carlisle explained. "A small area where Apache families could live under their own governance, maintaining their traditions, but in partnership with sympathetic white settlers. A place where both cultures could coexist and learn from each other." "You mean here?" Tom asked. "I mean a larger area, including your ranch, but extending beyond it. A place where young Apache like Aiyana could grow up knowing both worlds without having to choose between them." Aiyana's eyes lit up with something Tom had never seen before. Not just hope, but excitement. Other survivors could come here? Families could be together again? "It's possible," Carlisle said carefully. "Nothing is certain yet. There would be opposition, bureaucracy, politics. But if we can prove it works on a small scale, it could change everything," Tom finished. "It could," the senator agreed. "But it would require commitment from all sides. Trust, compromise, the willingness to believe that former enemies can become allies." As the senator and priest prepared to leave, Aiyana walked out to the corral where the young mare stood quietly, no longer skittish or afraid. Tom joined her, and they stood together in the gathering dusk. "What do you think?" Tom asked. I think, Aiyana said slowly, that morning frost sometimes lasts longer than my father believed. She turned to look at him. I think some promises might be worth trusting. Tom nodded, feeling something he'd thought lost forever, faith in the future. Then we'll try. Together. Together, she agreed. In the distance, a coyote howled, and its call was answered by another, then another, until the desert rang with their voices. It was a sound Tom had always found lonely before, but tonight it sounded different. Tonight it sounded like family calling to family across the vastness, bridging the spaces between them with songs of connection and hope. As the stars emerged in the clear New Mexico sky, Tom McKenna and Aiyana stood side by side, no longer the lonely rancher and the lost Apache girl, but partners in building something new, a place where different worlds could meet and find common ground. It wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't be perfect, but it would be theirs. The Wild West was changing, one act of courage at a time, one choice to see humanity over hatred. And in that change, both cultures would find not destruction, but transformation. Not the loss of identity, but the expansion of what it meant to be human in a land vast enough to hold all their dreams.